In the vast expanse of space, where stars shimmered like diamonds scattered across an endless black canvas, humanity's most advanced fleet drifted silently. Known as the Deathworlders, this armada of sleek warships and exploratory vessels had been tasked with one mission: to protect Earth's fragile colonies from cosmic dangers lurking in uncharted regions of the galaxy. For years, they patrolled the void without incident, until today. It began with a faint whisper cutting through the silence of deep space. At first, Captain Lyra Voss thought it was interference, some glitch in her ship's communication systems. But when the signal repeated itself, a haunting melody intertwined with bursts of static, it became clear that this was no accident. The crew gathered on the bridge of the flagship Eclipse, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of monitors displaying fragmented data. "Captain," said Lieutenant Aaron Solis, his voice steady but tinged with curiosity. "The signal, it's artificial." Lyra nodded, her sharp eyes scanning the readings before her. She was a seasoned leader, known for her calm demeanor under pressure and her ability to make tough decisions quickly. Her dark hair was tied back neatly, and her uniform bore the insignia of Earth's United Fleet. "Can we trace its origin?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. After a moment of tense calculation, the navigation officer spoke up. "Yes, ma'am. It's coming from a star system about 3 light-years away. Coordinates locked." The bridge fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Humanity had encountered alien life before, but never like this. This wasn't just random noise. It was deliberate, structured. Someone, or something, was trying to communicate. "What does the message say?" Lyra asked, turning to Ensign Mara Tolan, the linguistics expert on board. Mara hesitated, her fingers flying over her console. "It's complicated. There are patterns, almost like music, but also what looks like coordinates embedded within the signal. And there's a phrase repeating at intervals." She paused, then added softly, "Save us." That's all it says, over and over again. "Save us, or all will perish." A chill ran through the room. No one needed to say it aloud. The stakes were obvious. If this was a cry for help, ignoring it could mean disaster not only for whoever sent it, but potentially for humanity as well. Alien civilizations often operated on scales humans couldn't comprehend, and even small conflicts in space could spiral into galactic catastrophes. Lyra straightened, her expression resolute. "Set course for the source of the signal," she ordered. "Full speed. We don't know what we're walking into, but we can't turn our backs on this." As the engines roared to life and the fleet surged forward, each member of the crew felt a mix of excitement and unease. They were venturing into the unknown, driven by duty and curiosity. What awaited them? Was it friend or foe? Hope or horror? For now, answers lay hidden among the stars. All they could do was prepare and hope they weren't too late. The Deathworlder fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the mysterious star system, its ships gliding silently against a backdrop of swirling cosmic debris. The sight was both breathtaking and ominous. A dying sun hung in the center of the system, its light dimmed to a sickly orange glow. Around it orbited shattered remnants of planets, chunks of rock and metal floating aimlessly like pieces of a broken puzzle. At the heart of the chaos lay their destination, a desolate world cloaked in thick, toxic clouds that churned violently in the planet's turbulent atmosphere. Captain Lyra Voss stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, her gaze fixed on the holographic display projecting the planet's image. "This place looks like a graveyard," she muttered under her breath. Her tone carried a mix of awe and unease as she studied the readings flashing across her console. Radiation levels were dangerously high, and violent storms raged across the surface. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't natural. "Approaching the planet now, Captain," announced Lieutenant Commander Rhea Cade, the fleet's chief navigator. She adjusted the controls with practiced precision, guiding the flagship closer to the swirling maelstrom below. "Atmospheric entry will be tricky. Those winds could tear us apart if we're not careful. Lyra nodded. Prepare the landing team. We'll take one shuttle down to investigate. If this is where the signal originated, we need eyes on the ground. As preparations began, Lieutenant Aaron Solis joined Lyra on the bridge. His sharp features were lined with concern, but his dark eyes sparkled with curiosity. As the ship's xenobiologist, he was eager to uncover the truth behind the cryptic message they'd received. "Whatever's down there, it's been through hell," he said, pointing to the sensor data. Massive energy signatures coming from beneath the surface. Could be technology, or something else entirely. Moments later, the landing party boarded a heavily armored shuttle designed for hazardous environments. Alongside Solis and Lyra were two Marines, Corporal Dax Renner and Private Lyra Cole, and Engineer Cal Draven, whose expertise would prove invaluable if they encountered alien machinery. As the shuttle descended into the planet's atmosphere, turbulence rocked the craft violently, forcing everyone to grip their seats tightly. "Hold on," shouted the pilot, his knuckles white on the controls. Lightning crackled outside the viewport, illuminating jagged cliffs and rivers of molten lava snaking across the landscape. The air was thick with ash, making visibility nearly impossible. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the shuttle touched down on a relatively stable plateau. The hatch hissed open, revealing a surreal scene. Towering crystalline structures jutted out of the ground, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. The air smelled acrid, and the ground crunched underfoot like brittle glass. "This doesn't look natural," murmured Solis, stepping cautiously forward. He scanned the area with a handheld device, his brow furrowed in concentration. "These formations, they are emitting some kind of energy. It's almost alive." Before anyone could respond, a low hum filled the air. From the shadows between the crystals, ghostly figures emerged. They were tall and translucent, their forms shimmering like liquid light. Their large, almond-shaped eyes locked onto the humans, and though they made no sound, a voice echoed in everyone's minds. "You have come." Lyra stepped forward, raising a hand in a gesture of peace. "We heard your call. Who are you? What happened here?" The beings hesitated, their luminous bodies flickering faintly. Then, in unison, they spoke, not with words, but with thoughts that resonated deeply within each human mind. "We are the Lumineth, and we are dying." For a moment, no one moved. The weight of those words settled over the group like a heavy blanket. Whatever battle had ravaged this world, it wasn't over yet. And somehow, the Deathworlders had been drawn into its final chapter. The Lumineth stood motionless, their translucent forms shimmering faintly in the dim light of the alien landscape. Their presence was both mesmerizing and unsettling, a blend of fragility and otherworldly power. Captain Lyra Voss took a cautious step forward, her hand still raised in a gesture of peace. Behind her, the rest of the landing team remained alert, weapons at the ready but not aimed directly at the beings. The air crackled with tension. "We heard your call," Lyra repeated, her voice calm but firm. "Who are you? What happened here?" The Lumineth tilted their heads in unison, as if studying the humans before them. Then, without speaking aloud, their thoughts flooded into the minds of everyone present. It wasn't words exactly, more like emotions and fragmented images that pieced together into meaning. Pain, loss, desperation. "We are the Lumineth," came the collective reply, echoing inside their heads. "Once, we thrived. Our world was beautiful, full of light and harmony. But now, we are shadows of what we were." Lieutenant Aaron Solis stepped closer, his scientific curiosity outweighing his caution. "What destroyed your world?" he asked gently, his tone softening. "And why did you send the signal?" The Lumineth hesitated, their forms flickering faintly, as if struggling to maintain cohesion. When they responded, their message was disjointed, filled with flashes of chaos and terror. Images of towering machines erupting from the ground, consuming everything in their path. Swarms of writhing creatures overtaking cities, a relentless tide of destruction spreading across the planet. The Vorax, one of the Lumineth whispered, or rather projected. They came from below, from the depths of our world. We awakened them, by mistake. Lyra frowned, glancing back at Engineer Cal Draven, who had been quietly observing the exchange. Awakened them how? She pressed. Another wave of thoughts surged into their minds. Ancient ruins buried deep beneath the surface. Forbidden technology discovered during excavation. An experiment gone horribly wrong. The Lumineth had tapped into something far beyond their understanding. A parasitic hive mind that fed on life itself. Once unleashed, the Vorax consumed everything they touched, assimilating organic matter into their ever-growing swarm. They are not just invaders, the Lumineth continued, their voices growing weaker. They are hunger incarnate. They spread through worlds, leaving nothing behind. And now, they prepare to leave this place, to invade others. Private Lyra Cole shifted uncomfortably, gripping her rifle tighter. You mean, they're coming for us next? The Lumineth didn't answer directly, but the implication was clear. Humanity's survival depended on stopping the Vorax here and now. Corporal Dax Renner broke the silence, his gruff voice cutting through the eerie atmosphere. If these things are as bad as they say, we need more than just guesses. Where are they? How do we fight them? One of the Lumineth pointed toward the horizon, where jagged peaks loomed against the ash-filled sky. Beneath those mountains, they explained, lay the heart of the Vorax's operations, a colossal spire rising from the planet's crust. It pulsed with energy, drawing power from the core itself. If completed, it would launch the Vorax into space, spreading their corruption across the galaxy. We cannot stop them alone, the Lumineth admitted, their forms flickering even more erratically. But perhaps you can. Lyra exchanged a glance with Solus, who nodded almost imperceptibly. This mission had just become far more urgent and dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Take us there, Lyra said finally, turning back to the Lumineth. Show us the way. As the beings led the group deeper into the alien terrain, the weight of their responsibility settled heavily on the human shoulders. Whatever awaited them beneath those mountains, failure was not an option. Not for the Lumineth, not for Earth, and not for the countless worlds that might follow. The journey toward the jagged peaks was grueling. The Lumineth moved with an ethereal grace, their shimmering forms gliding effortlessly over the treacherous terrain. But for the humans, every step felt like a battle against both the environment and time itself. Ash swirled in choking clouds around them, stinging their eyes and clogging their breathing filters. The ground beneath their boots crunched ominously, brittle as glass, threatening to give way at any moment. Lightning split the sky above, illuminating the twisted landscape in flashes of blinding light. Lieutenant Aaron Solis adjusted his scanner, trying to make sense of the chaotic energy readings emanating from the mountains ahead. The spire's signal is getting stronger, he said, his voice muffled by his helmet's comm system. Whatever it is, it's massive. And it's not dormant. Captain Lyra Voss nodded grimly, her sharp gaze scanning the horizon. She could feel the urgency pressing down on her like the planet's oppressive atmosphere. Every second counted. If the Vorax truly intended to use the spire as a gateway to other worlds, humanity's survival depended on stopping them before they completed their preparations. Behind her, Engineer Cal Draven knelt beside a strange device half buried in the ash. It looked alien, angular and metallic, with faint blue veins of energy pulsing along its surface. This tech, it's advanced, he muttered, running his gloved fingers over its edges. But unstable. Feels like it's been patched together from scraps. He glanced up at Lyra. Whoever built this didn't care about safety. They just wanted results. Lyra frowned. You think the Lumineth made it? Draven shook his head. No. They're too delicate. This looks more like something scavenged or repurposed. Maybe the Vorax adapted it after taking over. As if on cue, the ground trembled violently, nearly knocking the group off their feet. From the distance came a low, guttural roar, a sound that seemed to reverberate through their very bones. The Lumineth froze, their translucent forms flickering anxiously. "They know we're here," one of them projected into their minds, its voice tinged with fear. "The Vorax sense intruders. They will send hunters." Corporal Dax Renner tightened his grip on his rifle, his jaw clenched. "Then we'd better move fast." The group pressed onward, climbing higher into the mountains. With each step, the air grew heavier, charged with an unnatural energy that made their skin prickle. Strange shapes began to emerge from the haze, twisted amalgamations of metal and flesh, writhing grotesquely as if alive. Some resembled insects, with chitinous exoskeletons and razor-sharp limbs. Others were unrecognizable horrors, their forms constantly shifting and reforming. "These must be the Vorax," Solus whispered, his voice trembling despite his best efforts to stay calm. "They're adapting, changing." Before anyone could respond, movement caught their attention. Dozens of those hybrid creatures scuttled out of the shadows, their glowing red eyes locking onto the intruders. They moved with terrifying speed, claws clicking against the rocky ground. "Get ready," Lyra barked, drawing her sidearm. The Marines raised their rifles, forming a protective perimeter around the Lumineth. The first wave struck without warning, leaping from the darkness with ferocious intent. Bullets tore through the creatures' armored hides, but they kept coming, undeterred by injury. One lunged at Private Lyra Cole, its claws slashing wildly. She fired point-blank, blasting it back, but another took its place instantly. "We can't hold them off forever," Renner shouted, firing repeatedly as the swarm closed in. Lyra gritted her teeth, realizing they couldn't afford to waste time fighting. "Fall back. Stick to the plan." The Lumineth gestured urgently toward a narrow crevice in the rock face. "Through there," they urged. "It leads to the spire." Without hesitation, the team retreated into the passageway, the Vorax snapping at their heels. As the last of them slipped inside, the creatures hesitated at the entrance, as if repelled by some invisible barrier. For now, they were safe, but only temporarily. Panting, Solus leaned against the wall, his scanner still active. "We're close," he said, his voice strained. "Too close to turn back." Lyra met his gaze, her expression resolute. "Then let's finish this." Ahead lay the heart of the Vorax's domain, and the fate of countless worlds rested on what they would find there. Back aboard the Eclipse, tension simmered like a storm waiting to break. The crew had been briefed on the situation. The Vorax, the Spire, and the looming threat to not just this dying planet, but potentially Earth itself. Yet, despite the gravity of their mission, cracks were beginning to form within the fleet. In the command center, Captain Lyra Voss stood at the head of a holographic table displaying tactical data about the alien world below. Around her, senior officers debated heatedly. Some argued for immediate action, while others questioned whether humanity should risk so much for an alien race they barely understood. "We're talking about throwing ourselves into a war that isn't ours," snapped Commander Elias Kane, the fleet's second-in-command. His broad frame loomed over the table as he jabbed a finger at the projection of the spire. "We don't even know if we can win. What happens if we fail?" The Vorax could turn their attention to Earth next. Lieutenant Aaron Solus stepped forward, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Kane's fiery tone. "And what happens if we do nothing?" he countered. "If the Vorax escape this planet, they'll spread across the galaxy. There won't be anywhere left to hide. Not for us, not for anyone." Kane scoffed. "That's assuming the Lumineth are telling the truth. How do we know this isn't some kind of trap? For all we know, they unleashed the Vorax themselves, and now want us to clean up their mess." Lyra held up a hand, silencing both men. Her voice was firm but measured. "Speculation won't help us. Right now, our priority is stopping the Vorax. If we pull out, we abandon the Lumineth, and possibly doomed countless other civilizations. Before Kane could retort, alarms blared throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed as engineers scrambled to contain the sudden surge of malfunctions rippling through critical systems. Navigation controls flickered offline, weapons arrays powered down unexpectedly, and communication channels crackled with static. "What's going on?" Lyra demanded, turning to Engineer Cal Draven, who rushed onto the bridge, his face pale. "It's sabotage," he said grimly, pulling up diagnostic reports on a nearby console. "Someone tampered with the reactor core. If I hadn't caught it in time, we'd have lost power entirely." The room fell silent. Sabotage. On board the flagship, the implications were chilling. Who would do something like this? Asked Lieutenant Rhea Cade, her voice trembling with disbelief. "This isn't just insubordination, it's treason." Lyra's jaw tightened. She scanned the faces of her crew, searching for any sign of guilt. "Lock down the ship," she ordered. "No one leaves their posts until we find the culprit." As security teams swept through the corridors, whispers spread among the crew. Trust, once unshakable, began to erode. Accusations flew. Some pointed fingers at recent transfers. Others suspected sympathizers who agreed with Kane's stance. Even friendships were tested as paranoia took hold. Meanwhile, deep in the engineering bay, Draven worked tirelessly to repair the damage. As he pried open a panel near the reactor, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. A small device wired directly into the system. It wasn't standard issue. It was crude, almost amateurish, yet effective. Whoever planted it knew enough to bypass safeguards but lacked the precision of a trained engineer. Draven hesitated, staring at the device. Then, quietly, he pocketed it instead of reporting it immediately. Something about its design felt familiar. On the planet below, the landing team continued their perilous trek toward the spire, unaware of the turmoil brewing above. Back on the Eclipse, however, the seeds of betrayal had been sown, and as the fleet prepared for its final stand against the Vorax, loyalty would be tested like never before. For Captain Lyra Voss, the hardest decisions still lay ahead. Could she trust her own crew, or had the enemy already infiltrated their ranks? The narrow crevice led the landing team deeper into the heart of the alien world, where the air grew colder and heavier with each step. The jagged walls of the tunnel glowed faintly with veins of crystalline material, casting eerie shadows that danced across their helmets. Lieutenant Aaron Solis adjusted his scanner, its soft beeping growing louder as they approached the source of the energy signature. Ahead, the passage widened into a cavernous chamber filled with towering machinery, twisted, organic-looking structures fused with metallic components. It was as if the technology had grown rather than been built. "This is it," Solis whispered, his voice trembling with awe and unease. "The spire's control node must be here." Captain Lyra Voss signaled for silence, her sharp eyes scanning the area. The Lumineth who had guided them this far hesitated at the edge of the chamber, their translucent forms flickering anxiously. "We cannot go further," one of them projected into their minds. The Vorax. They guard this place fiercely. Before anyone could respond, a low rumble echoed through the cavern. From the shadows emerged grotesque creatures, hybrids of flesh and metal, their bodies writhing and shifting as if alive. Some had elongated limbs tipped with razor-sharp claws, while others bore insect-like mandibles dripping with acidic saliva. Their glowing red eyes locked onto the intruders, and they let out guttural screeches before charging forward. "Take cover," Lyra shouted, diving behind a chunk of debris as the first wave of Vorax lunged toward them. Corporal Dax Renner and Private Lyra Cole opened fire, their rifles spitting bursts of plasma that tore through the creature's armored hides. But the Vorax didn't falter. Even when wounded, they kept coming, their regenerative tissue knitting together almost instantly. Solis crouched beside Lyra, clutching an experimental EMP grenade in his hand. "These things are part machine," he said urgently. "If we can disrupt their neural network, we might slow them down." Lyra nodded. Do it, but stay close. We can't afford to split up. As Solus primed the grenade and hurled it into the fray, a blinding pulse of energy rippled outward, causing the Vorax to convulse violently. For a moment, the assault halted, giving the team precious seconds to regroup. But the reprieve was short-lived. More creatures poured into the chamber, drawn by the commotion. Amid the chaos, Solus noticed something unusual, a young Lumineth figure lingering near the edge of the battle. Unlike the others, this one seemed solid, more resilient. Its shimmering form radiated determination rather than fear. When their eyes met, the being stepped forward, projecting its thoughts directly into his mind. "I am Scifi," it said. "I will help you reach the spire." Without waiting for a response, Scifi darted past the fighting, gesturing for them to follow. Though hesitant, Lyra gave the order to move, trusting the Lumineth's guidance. The group fought their way through the swarm, relying on teamwork and quick reflexes to survive. Each step felt like a gamble, but Scifi's knowledge of the tunnels proved invaluable, leading them through shortcuts and hidden paths that avoided larger groups of Vorax. As they neared the core of the spire, the environment became increasingly hostile. The walls pulsed with sickly green light, and the air crackled with static electricity. Strange whispers filled their ears, not words, but fragmented thoughts that clawed at their minds. Solus stumbled, clutching his head as memories of his late sister flooded his consciousness. She had died during a failed mission years ago, and the guilt he carried weighed heavily on him. "Aaron," Lyra called out, snapping him back to reality. He blinked, shaking off the mental intrusion. "Stay focused. We're almost there." Finally, they reached a massive door etched with intricate patterns that shifted and writhed like living vines. Beyond it lay the central control node, the key to stopping the Vorax. But as Scifi placed her hand against the surface, the door emitted a deep hum, and tendrils of energy snaked out, latching onto her translucent form. "What's happening?" Solus demanded, stepping forward. Scifi turned to him, her expression serene despite the pain evident in her flickering body. "I must interface with the spire," she projected. "It is the only way to open the path." "No," Lyra interjected firmly. "We don't know what this will do to you." But Scifi's resolve was unshakable. "My people have suffered enough. If I can help end this, then my sacrifice means something." With that, she merged fully with the spire, her form dissolving into pure light. The door slid open, revealing the final challenge ahead. As the team prepared to enter, Solus couldn't shake the feeling that Scifi's act of bravery would shape everything to come, and perhaps demand sacrifices of their own. The chamber beyond the door was unlike anything the team had encountered before. It stretched endlessly upward, its walls lined with pulsating veins of energy that glowed in shifting hues of blue and violet. At the center stood a massive structure, a towering spire made of crystalline material, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and writhe like living organisms. The air hummed with an almost unbearable intensity, vibrating through their suits and rattling their bones. Lieutenant Aaron Solus stepped cautiously forward, his scanner struggling to process the overwhelming data flooding its sensors. "This isn't just technology," he murmured, his voice tinged with awe. "It's alive, or at least part of it is." Captain Lyra Voss followed closely behind, her hand resting on the grip of her sidearm. Her sharp eyes scanned the room for threats, but aside from the ominous presence of the spire itself, there were no immediate signs of danger. For now, they had a moment to breathe, but she knew better than to let her guard down. "What do we do now?" Private Lyra Cole asked, her rifle trained on the shadows around them. Despite her bravado, her voice betrayed a hint of unease. The oppressive atmosphere weighed heavily on all of them, gnawing at their resolve. "We find a way to shut this thing down," Lyra replied firmly. She turned to Solus. "Can you access its systems?" Solus nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his expression. He approached the base of the spire, where a console-like interface jutted out from the crystalline structure. As he touched it, Images and fragmented thoughts flooded his mind, visions of an ancient civilization far more advanced than humanity or the Lumineth. They had harnessed unimaginable power, bending reality itself to achieve immortality. But their hubris came at a cost. They didn't mean to create the Vorax, Solus said aloud, piecing together the scattered memories forced into his consciousness. This spire was originally designed as a gateway, a portal to other dimensions. But something went wrong. The experiments destabilized reality, creating rifts that allowed the Vorax to invade. Corporal Dax Renner frowned, lowering his weapon slightly. So these things aren't native to this planet. They're invaders from another dimension. Exactly, Solus confirmed, his fingers flying over the alien controls as he tried to make sense of them. And if the spire activates, it'll open those rifts again, not just here, but everywhere. The Vorax will spread across the galaxy uncontrollably. Lyra clenched her jaw, the weight of their mission pressing down on her. Destroying the spire seemed like the only option, but doing so might seal the dimensional rifts forever, and cut off any chance of reversing the damage done to the Lumineth. Was it worth sacrificing an entire species for the greater good? Before she could dwell on the moral dilemma, the ground trembled violently. From the shadows emerged a new wave of Vorax, larger, more grotesque versions of the hybrids they'd fought earlier. These creatures radiated raw power, their bodies crackling with energy as they advanced with terrifying speed. "We don't have time to debate ethics," Renner shouted, raising his rifle. "We need to focus on survival." As the team prepared to defend themselves, Syra's voice echoed faintly in their minds. Though her physical form was gone, her consciousness still lingered within the spire. "You must destroy the core," she urged, her tone desperate yet resolute. "It is the only way to stop the Vorax. Trust me, I can hold them back long enough for you to act." Without hesitation, Solus activated the EMP grenades they'd brought, deploying them strategically to buy time. The pulses disrupted the Vorax temporarily, giving the group a narrow window to reach the heart of the spire. Inside, they found a pulsating orb suspended in midair, radiating waves of energy that distorted the very fabric of space around it. "This is it," Solus said, his voice trembling. "If we overload this core, it'll collapse the spire and seal the rifts permanently." Lyra hesitated, looking back at the chaos outside. Sacrificing the Lumineth felt wrong, but letting the Vorax escape would doom countless worlds, including Earth. With a heavy heart, she gave the order. "Do it." As Solus began the sequence to overload the core, the team braced themselves for what came next. The spire groaned ominously, its light flickering erratically. Whatever happened next, one thing was certain: there would be no turning back. The spire shuddered violently as Lieutenant Aaron Solus worked frantically to overload its core. His fingers moved with precision over the alien controls, sweat dripping down his brow despite the cool air inside his helmet. The pulsating ore at the heart of the structure grew brighter with each passing second, its energy radiating outward in waves that distorted reality itself. Cracks began to form along the crystalline walls, spiderwebbing across the chamber like veins ready to burst. Outside, the battle raged on. Corporal Dax Renner and Private Lyra Cole fought valiantly, their rifles firing non-stop as they held back wave after wave of Vorax. The creatures had grown more aggressive, their forms mutating into even more horrifying shapes. Some towering giants with jagged limbs, others small but lightning-fast predators that darted through the shadows. Every shot fired seemed to slow them only momentarily before they surged forward again. "We can't keep this up much longer," Renner shouted, ejecting an empty magazine and slamming a fresh one into place. His voice was strained, exhaustion evident in every word. "How's it going in there?" "Almost done," Solus called back, though his tone betrayed his fear. He glanced at Captain Lyra Voss, who stood nearby, her weapon drawn and ready to defend him. Her face was grim, her jaw clenched tightly as she watched the chaos unfold outside. She knew what was coming next, and so did everyone else. Inside the spire, Syra's presence lingered faintly, her thoughts still echoing in their minds. "You must leave now," she urged softly, her voice tinged with both sorrow and determination. "I will hold the Vorax here for as long as I can." "No," Solus protested, pausing briefly to look toward the source of her voice. "You've done enough, Syra. We're not leaving without you." "There is no time," she replied firmly. "The core is destabilizing. If you stay, you will perish with me. Go, save yourselves, and save your world." Her words struck deep, resonating with everyone present. For all their differences, humanity and the Lumineth shared one thing in common: the willingness to sacrifice everything for hope. And now, Syra had become the embodiment of that hope. Lyra stepped closer to Solus, placing a hand on his shoulder. "We have to go," she said quietly but firmly. "She's right. We've done all we can here." Reluctantly, Solus nodded, finishing the final sequence to overload the core. A deafening hum filled the chamber, and the orb began to glow blindingly bright, its energy spiraling out of control. "It's set," he announced, backing away quickly. "We have about 2 minutes before it blows." As they turned to leave, the ground trembled violently, nearly knocking them off their feet. The Vorax swarmed into the chamber, their screeches reverberating through the cavern. But then something extraordinary happened. Syra's consciousness surged outward, enveloping the creatures in a wave of radiant light. The Vorax froze mid-charge, their bodies convulsing as if caught in an invisible force field. "Go!" Syra's voice echoed one last time, stronger now, filled with resolve. "I am the Lumineth. This is my duty." With tears streaming down his face beneath his helmet, Solus followed Lyra and the others as they sprinted toward the exit. Behind them, the spire groaned louder, its structure beginning to collapse under the strain of the destabilizing core. Chunks of crystal fell from the ceiling, narrowly missing them as they ran. When they finally emerged into the open air, the sight was apocalyptic. The sky above churned with unnatural colors, and the ground quaked violently as the spire prepared to unleash its final destruction. Lyra ordered everyone onto the shuttle, which waited anxiously nearby. As the engines roared to life, they looked back just in time to see the spire erupt in a blinding explosion of light and energy. For a moment, the entire planet seemed to pause, bathed in the glow of annihilation. Then, silence. Back aboard the shuttle, no one spoke. They sat in stunned silence, processing what they had witnessed and lost. Syra's sacrifice weighed heavily on them all, a reminder of the cost of survival. But as the fleet ascended into orbit, Captain Lyra Voss allowed herself a small measure of hope. The rifts were sealed, the Vorax defeated for now. Humanity had faced unimaginable odds and prevailed, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that sacrifices like Syra's would haunt them forever. As the shuttle ascended through the planet's toxic atmosphere, the crew aboard watched in silence as the spire's explosion lit up the horizon like a second sun. The blinding light pulsed once, then faded, leaving behind a scared and lifeless landscape. The Vorax were gone, but so was any trace of the Lumineth civilization they had fought to save. The weight of what they had done and lost hung heavy over the team. Lieutenant Aaron Solus stared out the viewport, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the edge of his seat. Syra's final words echoed in his mind, haunting him with their quiet resolve. She had sacrificed herself not just for her people, but for humanity, for all life that might have fallen victim to the Vorax if the spire had been allowed to activate. And yet it didn't feel like victory. It felt like failure. "We did what we had to do," Captain Lyra Voss said quietly, breaking the oppressive silence. Her voice carried no triumph, only weary resignation. Syra knew the cost. She chose this. Solus turned to look at her, his eyes filled with pain. "Doesn't make it easier," he muttered. "She trusted us, believed in us, and now her entire species is gone because of our decision." Lyra met his gaze, her expression softening. Survival isn't always clean or fair. Sometimes it demands sacrifices we wish we didn't have to make. But remember this, we stopped something far worse from spreading. That counts for something. The shuttle docked with the Eclipse, and the landing party made their way back to the bridge. The mood aboard the flagship was somber. News of the Spire's destruction had spread quickly, and while relief rippled through the crew, it was tempered by grief for the Lumineth and unease about the future. Humanity had faced extinction-level threats before, but none quite like this. The Vorax had been unlike anything they'd ever encountered. A relentless, adaptive force driven purely by hunger and expansion. Back on the bridge, Engineer Cal Draven approached Lyra hesitantly, holding out the small device he found earlier during the sabotage incident. "Captain," he began, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I need to tell you something." Lyra raised an eyebrow, taking the device from him. "What is this?" "It's evidence," Draven admitted, his face pale. "Someone tampered with the reactor core. It wasn't random. I recognize the design. It's crude, but familiar. Someone on board wanted us to fail." Lyra's eyes narrowed. "Are you accusing someone specific?" Draven hesitated, guilt etched into his features. "It's me," he confessed finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I planted it. Not because I wanted us to lose. I thought we shouldn't risk ourselves for aliens. I believed Earth came first." For a moment, Lyra simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, without a word, she handed the device to Commander Elias Kane, who stood nearby. "Arrest him," she ordered coldly. "Confine him to quarters until we return to Earth. Let command decide his fate." Draven lowered his head, accepting his punishment without protest. As he was led away, Lyra turned back to the viewport, watching the devastated planet drift farther behind them. Betrayal cut deep, but there was no time to dwell on it. They still had one last task ahead. "Prepare the fleet for departure," she instructed. "We're heading home." But even as the engines roared to life and the Deathworlder fleet set course for Earth, questions lingered in everyone's minds. Had they truly ended the threat of the Vorax, or had sealing the rifts merely delayed the inevitable? And what other dangers awaited humanity among the stars? For now, though, they allowed themselves a brief moment of rest. They had survived. Against impossible odds, they had prevailed. But as Lyra gazed out at the endless expanse of space, she couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over, and that the universe still held countless secrets waiting to be uncovered. Some would bring hope, others despair, and humanity would face them all together. The Deathworlder fleet drifted silently through the void, its ships battered but intact after their harrowing mission. The journey back to Earth was long and quiet, each crew member lost in their own thoughts. For some, it was grief over the loss of the Lumineth and Syrah's ultimate sacrifice. For others, it was relief that humanity had been spared from the Vorax's insatiable hunger. And for a few, like Engineer Cal Draven, now confined to his quarters under heavy guard, it was regret for choices made in fear and doubt. Captain Lyra Voss stood on the bridge of the Eclipse, her gaze fixed on the stars streaming past the viewport. She felt the weight of leadership more acutely than ever before. Every decision she'd made, from ordering the destruction of the Spire to arresting one of her own crew, had come at a cost. Yet, as she reflected on the events that had unfolded, she couldn't deny the sense of hope stirring within her. Humanity had faced an unimaginable threat and emerged stronger, not because they were invincible, but because they had chosen to stand together when it mattered most. Lieutenant Aaron Solis joined her on the bridge, his usual curiosity replaced by a quiet solemnity. "Do you think we'll ever see anything like the Lumineth again?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. Lyra glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe not exactly like them," she replied. "But I believe there are other civilizations out there, some peaceful, some dangerous. Our job is to learn from encounters like this, to grow wiser, braver, better." Solis nodded slowly, his mind drifting back to Syra. Her courage and selflessness had left an indelible mark on him. Though her species was gone, her legacy lived on in the lives they had saved, including his own. "She gave everything for us," he murmured. "We owe it to her to honor that." As the fleet approached Earth's orbit days later, preparations began for debriefings with command. Reports were filed, logs reviewed, and lessons documented. The sabotage attempt by Draven cast a shadow over the mission's success, raising questions about trust and loyalty within the ranks. But even amidst the scrutiny, there was pride, a shared understanding that they had done what needed to be done, no matter how difficult. When the Eclipse finally docked at Earth's orbital station, the crew disembarked to a hero's welcome. Families reunited, tears flowed freely, and speeches praised their bravery. But for Lyra and her senior officers, the celebration was bittersweet. They knew the truth behind the victory, the sacrifices, the moral dilemmas, the lingering uncertainties about whether they had truly ended the Vorax threat or merely delayed it. In the weeks that followed, humanity began rebuilding its relationship with the cosmos. Efforts were launched to study the data recovered from the Spire, hoping to unlock its secrets without repeating the mistakes of the past. Colonies strengthened their defenses, and new technologies were developed to prepare for whatever dangers might lie ahead. One evening, Lyra found herself standing on a balcony overlooking Earth's blue-green surface. The planet glowed peacefully below, a reminder of all they had fought to protect. Lieutenant Solus joined her, holding 2 cups of steaming coffee. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his cup slightly. Lyra smiled faintly, clinking her cup against his, "and to remembering those who showed us the way." For now, humanity was safe, but the universe remained vast and mysterious, full of wonders and terrors yet undiscovered. As the Deathworlder fleet prepared for its next mission, one thing was certain: they would face whatever came next, not with fear, but with hope. Because even in the darkest corners of space, light could always be found, if you were brave enough to seek it.